The Election Commission of India has announced the next general election. Voting will last for about 5 weeks, starting on the 7th of April, and it will probably take a few days after that to get the full results and for government formation to begin. The new government, whatever its composition and whichever party leads it, will be faced with some very significant and difficult economic policy choices to be made. It has to address runaway inflation, stagnating growth, very poor employment generation, and other such serious issues. The recent meetings in the capital of Myanmar are very significant considering all the changes that are taking place in the Indo-Pacific region. Although no significant agreements were signed, there was a lot of discussion and emphasis laid on issues of connectivity and energy. Unfortunately, the government of India has been in election mode for some time, and there has been no progress in any of the road or rail projects that have been discussed for the last many years. In the meantime, oil has started to flow through a pipeline from Myanmar into southern China, and the presence of other navies in the Bay of Bengal area has grown. Bangladesh is also in some political turmoil, and the new government must pay much more attention than it has to the Bay of Bengal community. Ukraine remained in the headlines, at least globally, though unfortunately in India not enough attention has been paid. A lot has happened. The West has threatened and in fact begun to impose sanctions on Russia, even as diplomacy has picked up, and there have been some meetings already between the Russian foreign minister and the US Secretary of State, but no progress so far. Meanwhile, the Crimean parliament has voted to merge itself into Russia and set a referendum date 10 days from now. These actions are being condemned loudly by the Crimean parliament, which itself has questionable legitimacy, and by Western nations, particularly the Europeans, who are very concerned that if there are to be any political changes in Europe, that they be managed and they be gradual. The Indian statement takes note of the fact that countries have legitimate interests in what happens in neighboring countries, and this clearly takes account of Russia's interests in Ukraine and particularly in the Crimea. India and other countries are in a fairly delicate situation because they have close relations with Russia as well as with Europe and the United States, and they need to walk a fine line. Therefore, the Indian statement has been a considered statement, and the slight leaning towards Russia is in recognition of our own historical experience. Well, the European Union has offered $15 billion in financial support and assistance to the Ukrainians. This is clearly a counteroffer to the $15 billion that Russia had earlier offered. It is hardly going to make up the loss to the Ukrainian economy that will come from the political turmoil as well as the quadrupling of gas prices from Russia. Meanwhile, it is likely to be difficult for the European Union to actually fulfill its commitment, considering that problems within the Eurozone are themselves continuing. Well, ever since Saudi Arabia began to voice publicly its dissatisfaction with American policies in the Arab world, and particularly when the US backed off from actually taking military action against Assad after he was accused of using chemical weapons, differences within the Arab world have become more and more vocal. Um, Clearly, Qatar seeks and has in fact been playing a much larger role than a small country of its size would normally be expected to do. It was very large in assisting European nations in their attacks on Libya in 2011, particularly in that it provided Libya with oil and then also sold Libyan oil on behalf of the transitional government so that it could bypass UN sanctions which were in place at the time against Gaddafi's Libya. Now Qatar has rejected Saudi efforts for a closer union among the six Gulf Arab countries. This is itself a rather complicated exercise because in the meanwhile Morocco and Jordan had been invited and have both joined the Gulf even though they are not really near the Gulf Cooperation Council. I think we should expect to see more discord, especially because relations between the US and Iran have started to ease a little bit. Turkey, which was playing a quite positive role in the whole region around it, is now engulfed with its own problems. And therefore, there has been more scope for differences among the Gulf countries to become public.